Oh, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Jenny Tutone. I'm the program director here at the Natural History Institute. Before I introduce tonight's speakers, I have a few quick announcements. The restrooms and water fountains are on the other side of that wall, but to access them, you need to go through this hallway and keep turning right. If you go up the stairs, you've gone too far. A reminder to please silence your cell phones. We will have a question and answer after the presentation. Please hold all questions until the end. I'd also like to encourage you to sign up for our email list. If you're not already on there, it's the best way to get a seat for these presentations and hear about all of our wonderful programs. And a reminder that we are a 501c nonprofit, and we exist because of your support. You can help us keep our speaker series free by donating. We have cash boxes up the front. We have check envelopes. We take cards. We do Venmo. If you're having trouble donating, come and see me, and I'll help you out on that. And then we are holding an exciting raffle featuring 4 stunning birds of prey prints, generously donated by Donna Larson. These prints were created during the historic United States Pacific Railroad expeditions and surveys, which took place from 1853 to 1855. So this is your chance to own a piece of history. Raffle tickets are $10 each, and you can see the prints on your way to the gallery. You can see me after the presentation to purchase tickets. And currently in our gallery is a new exhibition, Spiritual Landscapes. Spiritual Landscapes invites you to explore the deep interconnectedness of nature through the eyes of 2 Arizona artists, Donna Larson and Sheila Kollasch. This exhibition features vibrant paintings, intricate drawings that reflect natural history and literature of our Southwest region over many years. And Spiritual Landscapes will show in the Natural History Institute Gallery through April 11th. And the gallery will remain open after the presentation, so you can check it out. So now we have the pleasure of hearing from both artists tonight. So please give a warm welcome to our first speaker, Donna Larson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am a self-taught artist. I've done some work with the universities, and I'll explain that later, but mostly I started out as an artist when I could hold a pencil or a crayon. And I specifically remember way back that my little sister was born in 1947. I was born in 42. And I remember trying to do a drawing of nursery rhyme characters for her. Excuse me. I was trying to draw a lamb and the curliness of the fur. And I was on the floor, and I had a crayon, and I was just trying to get those little tiny curls. It was so frustrating. But that's the first time I remember starting my art. And from then on, I drew, and I did all kinds of artwork. And I finally got to Arizona, and then I really started doing more and more artwork and more hiking into the landscapes. So that's my introduction, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my biography, a little more. This is Michigan, where I was born. Saginaw is up in that little red dot in the thumb. And Michigan is a place where there's lots and lots of water. There are not just the Great Lakes, but there are lots of little lakes and lots of rivers and lots of what we call wetlands. And I was brought up in a subdivision that was just being started, just outside the limits of Saginaw. And it was a lot of open land and a lot of water, swamps and things like that. And my friends and I would frequent those wetlands. We would catch and imprison lots of critters, including bugs, butterflies, frogs, toads, pollywogs, crawdads, anything we could get our little hands on. And then school started, and during the summers we'd go back to the swamp. Of course, our parents always told us, stay away from the swamp and stay away from new building sites. So that's exactly what we did, is go to the swamps. I moved to Arizona in 1972, and I accepted a position at Arizona State University. But before that, I think that's really out of order. But before that, I was in school drawing and stuff, but I never took an art class. My parents emphasized the 3 R's, and all the way through junior high and high school, although art was offered in those schools as an elective, I never took that. I just drew on my own, and I drew pictures of people, and I drew pictures of animals, and I just loved it. And I continued loving it through college. I never took an art course. I majored in, let me see, I've got to get this doing. I majored in Russian language and literature at the university with minors in political science and English literature. So after that, my degree was a master's degree in library science, moved to Washington, D.C., worked as a reference librarian for the government at the Voice of America. And in 1969, got to remember the dates here, moved back to Michigan in Detroit. My husband at the time was employed, excuse me, at the UAW as an assistant general counsel, and I worked at Wayne State University in the law library. So I was set up in the government field with reference work, and then I moved to Arizona as a single woman and decided at that point I was going to look into things I really, really loved to do, and that was hiking and art. And so here it is, hiking and backpacking. These are some of the first works I remember studying a little bit about art at the Scottsdale Community College. And also I took classes at ASU in the engineering school on color and on perspective and a little bit of art history when I had time off or when I could sandwich it in. These are 2 pieces that I did when I started learning more about the media and about different ideas about art. The first one is called System of 8 Realities, and it's 8 different circles. There's a form in the middle. The top middle one is a woman holding a child, and each circle adds another form. So there'll be a circle with 2, then 3, 4, on up to 8. And it just swirls and swirls around. It's all done in ink. So that's me expanding and my ideas about art and my ideas about what I should present. The second one is called The Door Opens, and that's formed from a Rumi poem called I've been living on the lips of insanity, wanting to find answers. The door opens, I've been knocking from the inside. And at one point I started combining sketching with my outdoor activities. By that time I was hiking and backpacking throughout Arizona on weekends and holidays. And there I am sketching outside. And the figure, the painting on the right is an oil I did from a photograph that I took when I was backpacking in the Gila Mountains in New Mexico. I really, really fell in love with the outdoors, and I really fell in love with backpacking. Whoops. I went into encaustic and different mediums. I also did work in oil pastels and pastels, as well as the black and white graphite and ink. Those are aspen that I did. I don't know if you probably all know a little bit about encaustic. I found it really incredibly intense and difficult. These are pieces that I read. I read a lot about myths with Campbell, Gimbutas, and so I started working on things that described what I felt about those myths. The one on the left is the figure of a bear. The bear is an indigenous figure of power and strength, and the bear in this one, it's rather a, what do I want to say, a kind of an abstract of this bear pushing out forms for the world. And the one on the right is a graphite that I did. The sculptor, the potter on the right, formed that bowl, and humanity is in it, and it's a thought about Coleridge, the quote, "The center does not hold." And so these figures are coming out of that beautiful bowl, and the swirling forms around it either go in or come out. Sheila and I met in a class in the 1980s. It was a class taught by an art critic and journalist. And she traveled from Santa Fe. There were about 10 or 12 people in that class, all artists, all different mediums, all different ideas. And it was a wonderful class. We'd meet on weekends and discuss everything. And that's where Sheila and I discovered we had mutual friends and mutual likes and mutual everything. So we started getting together, and I learned so much in that class. I have to say that was one of the best things I did in my expansion after I got through Michigan and back. This is describing the images that I picked up while hiking. The first one, the burl and bees, which is in the gallery here, I looked at that. I brought that piece of wood and the burl with me out of the woods. And I looked and looked and looked at it for a long time until I started to draw it. And it seemed like it was like a globe with things coming out of it, creatures, forms, and also forms coming back into it, landing on it. So I put those in there. So if you look closely, you can find the dancers and the critters. And then I've surrounded it with the beehive, the living things. The next one, nest, I was on a backpack near Sheila, Arizona. It was in the fall. This little nest was up in a tree, and I could reach it, thank God. And it was a beautiful, beautiful little nest. It was so firmly woven and just incredible. And inside there were 2 little hollow eggs, so it had been abandoned. And I looked at that for a long time too, and finally drew it. And it's a beautiful piece of engineering. The next one, I was hiking near Tonto Creek. There are a lot of elk there. I was off trail, and I found that skull. That skull is partially gone. It's been chewed on. It's been taken apart. I brought it home with me, and then later I started drawing it. And I drew it as carefully as I could, all the detail I could. Then I thought, the background has to be the detritus and the stuff that was around it when I found it. So I incorporated how the light would shine on pieces of grass and twigs and whatever. Some of my work is formed on photos. And the piece on the left, on your left, is a photo of petroglyph. The petroglyph is near New River, Mesa, and it's known to all the archaeologists and everything, but I saw in it, it seems to have a story with it. There's a figure on the far left, and it looks like it's throwing something. The figures in the middle, there's one large figure and two smaller ones. To me, it looks like a woman with children. And the figure on the far right, the horseback rider, even looks to me like it has a helmet. And that's the pastel I did, basing it on this photograph that I had taken. And I called it First Contact because it really tells a story. These are the images that I've used. I love rock art. And as I got older and my knees failed and I had them replaced and I can't do what I used to do in the outdoors, I started looking at petroglyphs and joining organizations. The Utah Rock Art Research Association, the American Rock Art Research Association, the Arizona Archaeological Association. And a friend of mine and I did some marbling on paper one weekend. And I pushed those papers aside, took a bunch home. And one day I took one out in my studio and looked at it. And I saw the figures. That's the one on the left. I saw these figures in it, and they reminded me of the deities that the Navajo used, the Ye, or Yebiche. So I worked on those for a while, and then I thought, let me put some figures over those. So I used some of the Membres, Hopi figures, Anasazi, and anything I could remember from books and from tours I had done of petroglyph in the Four Corners area. And that's why I called it Yay. And the piece on the right is Pecos River spirits. I don't know how many of you know too much about the Pecos River. It's in Texas, and I'm looking for my slide here. The organization, there's an organization there called SHUMLA, and it stands for the Studying Human Use of Materials, Land, and Art. And they're doing an extensive work on those canyons in the lower Pecos in Texas. They're studying how the indigenous people did the grounding of those walls. And they're studying what kind of pigment was used chemically. And they're studying what the order of the pigment on them is. And it seemed to me that all these figures are just flying off that wall. They're just incredibly spiritual figures, and they're going everywhere. And this is a slide of one of my pieces that's in the gallery. It's called Weaving. And I like it because it's really a dismantling and a weaving, putting together. It's both. I want to describe, too, why I use internal frames within some of my work. I think that every one of us has their own internal frame that they view things through. And so I put that into many things. Some things come out of it, some things are contained within it. And I really enjoy using graphite and ink, mainly black ink, sometimes colored, because I want people to, when they view my art, to add their own color and their own interpretation through that lens of the frame, and also add their own color and shape. The photo beside it is a photo of my journals, as it says. My journals are about, you look at them, they're random. Some are collage, some are writing, some are simply sketching and doodling. All of the entries are dated, but they're not in chronological order. So I just grab what I can for the size I need at the particular time. So when now I'm in a class or I'm just watching TV or listening to something, I might take any one of them, the one I feel is good, and I grab a pen, maybe a colored pen, maybe a black. So that's my story. I'm always doing art, and I think I always had. From the age of at least 4.5. I think my cards are a little mixed up here. Okay. And I want to mention, not long ago, Sheila and I were talking, and she mentioned a wonderful book. I still haven't read it. I've skimmed through it, but I haven't given it my full attention. It's called The Work of Art, and it's by Adam Moss. And I think he describes what happens when an artist is producing something. They work at it. It's work. And it is, he describes it as patience through tedium, or hacking your way through failure, or obsession, or compulsion. And I get back to that image that I remember clearly, laying on the floor with a crayon trying to do these little circles for a lamb, for Mary had the little lamb or something like that, whatever I was trying to do for my newly born sister. So yeah, Adam Moss. I think that book is going to be so wonderful to read. And he's also on YouTube, and he's also, well, he's got a lot of good reviews. And that's my artistic process. I have a really love for research, for reading. I love science. I'm a bit of a dilettante, but I've always loved artwork, and I've always loved the outdoors, even catching critters and imprisoning them. So, okay, that's it, and I'm going to thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna. And by the way, that Adam Moss, I heard that Lee and I, my partner, heard it on the drive home from Tucson in December, and he was an episode of Freakonomics on NPR, and it was amazing. And Lee is always telling me I should do this or maybe do this in my paintings or something, and I go, that's not quite it. And this guy explained it in words so magically that Lee now totally understands why I love to go be in my studio, and that the finished product is not the goal. It's the doing of it, and what can I create, and what is the challenge, and so forth. And so I went and bought the book right away and shared that with Donna. So where's my thing? Okay. Anyways, becoming a practitioner of natural history. It's 1952. I'm 2 months old. Dad is headed from the Midwest to anywhere. He never has to shovel snow again. Mom and I are in tow with all their belongings. During a stop in Tempe to visit a cousin, Dad gets a job framing post-World War II houses. He looks around and decides, hey, it doesn't snow here. I think this will do. So we settled in Phoenix, and then this is our first house, 1953. That's me at 1 year old. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath block home in a new development just outside the city of Phoenix limits. The house sits on a bare dirt lot. There's no landscaping, no fence, and there won't be for a few years. 5 siblings arrive in pretty quick order. Believe it or not, this location of this home on that bare lot is where my love of nature begins. And how does such a bleak setting do this? Well, you see, there was raw desert 3/4 of a mile to the north, and 3 blocks to the west was farmland as far as you could see. The magic was the irrigation ditch that ran along 31st Avenue, separating the housing development from the farmland. And the neighbor kids, my brothers, and I cooled ourselves in irrigation ditches like this that meandered more like creeks instead of flowing in straight lines indicated by water company maps. Our suburban desert creeks were lined with huge cottonwood, ash, mesquite, and palo verde trees. The perfumed aromas of desert rainstorms and wet creosote bring back my earliest and most precious memories of childhood. So of course we escaped there every chance we could get. We weren't supposed to go there like Donna. You weren't supposed to play in places like that. But the place we lived, this is a picture I found on the internet. There were actually more trees than this, and you couldn't see the houses across 31st Avenue. It was so dense. And I would walk through that dirt in there in bare feet and smell those willows and smell those cottonwoods. And when the cottonwoods in Phoenix in the desert or anywhere that it's hot, just to hear the rustling of leaves made me feel cooler. It was so magic. And I wanted to escape there every chance I could get. And then we moved. This was actually a picture of a typical irrigation ditch of the time. And once again, with the Fremont cottonwood trees lining it. Interestingly enough, in the 70s, I think, or 60s, SRP started removing all those cottonwood trees around the ditches and canals because they thought they were soaking up too much water. They learned later on, in reality, that their shade saved more water than they sucked up. But those trees were my magical playground because we moved to another place when I was 10 years old that had a smaller ditch, not one you could really play in, but the trees were even more magnificent around it. So that irrigation ditch is where I fell in love with nature. And this is one of my paintings I call Pass Through, and it looks very much like some of the trees did in that area. And the more I explored, the deeper my love grew, and quite naturally, my art reflects that love. And this one is of Tres Rios Ponds, some reclamation ponds west of Phoenix, where all the communities around the valley, their water goes in and gets purified, and then it goes down these series of ponds before it's released back into the Salt River to recharge the water table. But the ponds are beautiful, and they're swarming with bird life, and I even saw a beaver there one of the times I was there. And it was so beautiful. Every dream I've chased and all of my art has its birth in these early years and in those experiences. As an adult, I continually thank 2 people in particular for introducing me to key elements of our desert world and guiding me to so many great trails and streams for decades. This is my brother Tom, who's 1 year younger than me, and when I was about 22 or so, I was already hiking in the desert mountain parks of Phoenix, which is one of the reasons I never left as an adult, because they were so accessible. But he took me into the superstitions for my first time ever, And I was like, oh, this is what it's like? Because I was only used to seeing that rampart that you see from Apache Junction, and it looks so menacing. And I thought, you can hike back here? And so he took me on the first water trail to Garden Valley. He tells everybody he created a hiking monster. And backpacking became my favorite sport, and I thoroughly loved it. And I met Lee because I wanted a partner who would hike with me. And so we've been together 22 years, and it's been great. The other person who helped me a lot was a fellow called Jerry Van Gass. Donna knows him too. This is one of the paintings I did more recently of Superstition Mountain, a small oil painting. And this is a Jerry trip on the Dolores River in Colorado. I signed on to one of his float trips in 1982, and these outings traveled are too many to count. And they were quite wonderful. And I always carried my Canon AE1 set with me. I can't believe how heavy my backpack was in the 80s. Unbelievable. And then Lee and I got really lightweight stuff in the 2000s. Oh my gosh, what a game changer that was. I was taking about half the weight, and I had a little digital camera, and it was just awesome. I could walk upright and go all weekend in backpacking. It was fabulous. Took thousands of images, much like this one here. Everywhere we hiked, I have crates full of 35 millimeter slides of places I've been. And here is one I took recently. We were in Arches National Park. And this one will actually be a contender for a new painting this year. It won't look exactly like this, but I'm going to do the workshop on Saturday where I show how I transform my photos into the sketches that become the final paintings. And this is a picture of a river trip on the Green in 1985. That's me in the blue Gore-Tex suit. But I only rode the flat water. I didn't row any of the rapids or Cataract Canyon or any of that stuff. But it's important to have friends you can drag along with you on your outings. I was good at talking friends into joining me, and these were in addition to adventures that had presented themselves to me throughout life and throughout my wonderful friends. Here are some more recent photos of those friends. I got to pretend to be the experimental artist in residence for Vermilion Cliffs National Monument for the BLM, beginning in 2013. They were going to create an artist in residence program, and the person who was Maggie Sacher, who was heading up the Friends group for Vermilion Cliffs, called me in a tizzy that the artist they had just didn't work out. She was afraid of snakes. She wasn't going to go into the wild. She wanted all this stuff. And I said, oh, no, that's terrible. Is there anything I can do? And I thought she wanted my help as a museum professional, which is what I did for 30 years. And I said, well, I'll help you find somebody or whatever. We hung up. I called her back the next day and went, oh, pick me, pick me, pick me. I want to be that person. And I was. So I spent all my vacation time from museum work at Vermilion Cliffs in one way or another. And I talked my friend May Cheney, she's on the left here, and then Donna into going with me for extended trips. If I had a 3-day weekend, I had a week's vacation, whatever. I was up there experimenting and doing sketches and doing whatever I could to have a good time. And here's Donna at White Pocket, behind the guide that I hired for this particular trip up there. And I've been to White Pocket probably 4 or 5 times. And one time I talked May and her husband into going with me. I hired a guide who dropped us and our camping gear there for 3 days and 3 nights. And it was freaking amazing to be up there. But we didn't have much starlight. There was a lot of cloud cover during that trip. But to have that place all to yourself and to be able to wander it was fabulous. And this is BLM Ranger Kara Hand at Powell Monument up on top. As part of my perk, I got to ride along with rangers at various times and go to places that most people don't get to see. And it was truly a special thing. Unfortunately, then came the budget cuts for monuments and so forth after this. I wrote up a complete proposal and a report on what they had to offer that didn't cost them any money, just maybe some time from the Rangers for other artists to be able to sign up and do this, but no progress has been made on that, unfortunately, ever since then. So, and this, I want to thank my great teachers. I wouldn't be anywhere without them. And this one in particular is Sylvia Orman, my high school art teacher at Central High School for 3 years. I wrote the text behind there. It's a dedication to the exhibition. It's my solo museum exhibition at the Arizona Museum of Natural History in 2002. And on it I said, teachers save lives through their dedication. And this exhibition is dedicated to my high school art teacher, Sylvia Orman. And I'm so happy that she got to share that moment with me. It was really special. And then, speaking of friends, new learning adventures that make new friends. These are 3 Lolos. Donna mentioned the writing class. Well, we would get together every now and then, the 10 of us, and one weekend, we all went to a friend's cabin up near Payson. And what we would do was read the writings we had done in the meantime to each other and critique them. And the husbands came, and they were somewhere else. And at the end of the day, or the weekend, they said, we came up with a name for you gals. We're calling you the Lolos. And we're like, what does that mean? They said, yeah, you guys it'd be real quiet. And then all of a sudden, all this hilarious laughter would burst out of the cabin and stuff. So we're calling you the ladies of the literary orgasm. So we are the Lolos, and 4 of us continued to get together pretty much every couple months for years after that. And it was a very important thing because I learned, I was never felt good about writing. And so I started trying to write my own statements about some of my art. And this painting, Settling into Place, has one. I call it Geologic Jewels Strewn Across the Desert, Resting in the Shadows of Reflected Sky. Flowing fragments of fissures broken free from large outcroppings, smoothed by flash floods, repose in low recesses across the desert floor. Desert detritus waiting for more rain showers to carry them to the next stop downstream, where they will rest in a new pattern for their journey in the cycle of erosion. Every time the waters cease, there lies a new painting at my feet. Thank you, thank you. So here is another one. This is Cathedral Valley Rock Crevice. And this one is a piece from Vermilion Cliffs up on top. I want to peer into the cracks, harboring the wind-blown seeds that wait for the next rain in a soft bed of fine silt left by many breezes. In these cracks and crevices are future forests and the wildflowers of next season. While we're on that, I have a story. My work was actually included in a lot of invitational museum exhibitions beginning when I was about 26. And I had pieces in 2 different, I can't remember what the name of it is now, an exhibition that the Tucson Museum of Art would have for women Arizona artists. And I had this one piece in that looked a lot like this. It was a pastel from Utah with flowers growing out of that crevice. And their art critic in the Tucson paper said, I'm sick and tired of this feminist vaginal art form such as Sheila Kollasch does in blah, blah, blah. And I went, what? What? And doesn't he know that that's how everything is born from a seed? It's in these little cracks where the fine dirts are and the water can gather. And I was so incensed, I couldn't believe it. And then one of our mutual friends started calling me Crack Rock Kollasch. Well, there's Crack Rock Kollasch again. Here she goes. So anyways, that was actually a good thing because it got me fired up and starting to write about what my art was really about. So my adult life was not planned, actually. Most of the time, I felt I was lost and had no idea what I was doing. The thing that was hard work but gave me pleasure and a sense of satisfaction was the doing of art. And that has always been inspired by nature. And because I became addicted to hiking trails and the landscapes they wound through were my church, my counselor, physical therapy, and muse. What I see looking back on my 72 years is that I was good at recognizing opportunities that presented themselves, and somehow I made choices that wove a life that I'm now happy with. Thank you very much.
Now we have time for some questions for Sheila and Donna. Donna, you want to come up here as well? Perfect. Here's the handle. Any questions? Just repeat the question back for the live streamers.
I have a question for Donna.
Yes?
With all the graphite, do you ever use the eraser?
Not often. Repeat, the question is, do I ever use an eraser with my graphite? I do sometimes, and you can actually draw with the eraser if you have the flat. I have my graphite in sort of a palette. It goes through all the B and all the H hardnesses, and I use the H's for the light and the B's for the dark. And so different, it's really a palette. Yes?
How do you keep the graphite from smearing?
How do I keep the graphite from smearing? I'm very careful. I use a bridge, which is a piece of wood about that wide. It's got little things on the edges, so it's up above, and my hand can rest on that. Or sometimes I also use a cloth, a very lightweight cloth, and I might rest my hand with it. Yes?
One of your slides, you mentioned encaustic. What is that?
Encaustic is when you use wax as a base. There are a couple kinds of wax. You heat it up and you add an oil pigment to it. And it can be very thick. It can be put on also very hot and be thin. And it has a nice, what do I want to say, a nice texture. Anyone else?
On these wonderful skill sets that you possess, how much of it do you feel is an organic process or a gift from beyond?
I'd like to answer that. It's a frickin' hard lot of work. He wanted to know how we got this talent or how it evolved or whatever, or if it was a gift. No, it's something that I became attracted to at a very young age, and obviously Donna did too, and we set about doing the work. I was an art major my first time through university and had 8 semesters of life drawing. When I wanted to learn to draw clouds, I carried a sketchbook around with me for 3 years every time I went outside and I drew clouds. It's a deliberate goal to learn how to do the various things. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
And it's persistence. I mean, that's what Sheila described, but it's just, you sometimes feel you're failing, but then you keep going and keep going. And sometimes I put pieces aside and I look at them upside down. I put them away for months, bring them back out, fiddle around.
Yes, sir.
How do you know when you're done?
How do I know when I'm done with a piece? That's a good question. It hangs on the wall for at least a month or two where I pass by it every day and I look at it before I varnish it because all of mine are oils. And I varnish them once I decide that they're finished. And so, yeah, many times I will go back in and go, it needs something else. It needs some blue. It needs a little more red. It needs this area sharpened up. And one time Lee goes, it needs some purple. And I went, oh, he's right. It needs purple. And so I put purple in it, and sure enough, it was a 40 by 60 oil, and it sold and went to Idaho. But anyways, it's a process as well. Any other questions? Nobody? Nobody wants any questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you to Donna and Sheila. We have NHI hats for them. And the gallery will be open, so go explore and ask them questions in there. Thank you for coming.